interview has been tape recorded, and I'm DC Louise Thomas of CID in Aberystwyth Police Station.
April! April!
Also present is
DC Noel Blakeman.
It's the biggest missing person search in British police history. In October 2012, April Jones disappeared close to her home in the town of Machynlleth, Wales.
Can you give me a full name and date of birth, please?
It's Mark Leonard Bridger, 6th of the 11th, 1965.
Within 24 hours, local man Mark Bridger was arrested on suspicion of her abduction.
The date is the 2nd of October 2012, and we're in Aberystwyth Police Station.
Desperate to bring April home alive, police spent 5 days face to face with their prime suspect.
Mark, we don't want her to suffer anymore.
If he was going to conceal a body, because of April's size, she'd be quite easy to conceal.
But Bridger refused to give up April, even as a nation prayed for her safe return.
If you saw anything, heard anything, help this family find their lovely child.
Now, using police recordings never before heard.
We need to bring her home.
I know.
Interviews with April's family and, for the first time, with the two detectives who led Bridger's questioning.
You could see the pure venom in his face.
He did not like to be depicted as a paedophile.
With unprecedented access to police evidence and those who pieced it together.
I'm being told that there is no forensic evidence, nothing.
And the forensic psychologist brought in, who's never spoken before about the case.
He probably was someone who had fantasized about abducting and murdering a child.
This is the hour-by-hour story of how police tried to extract the truth from the man they believed had murdered April.
We needed Mark Bridger to talk, and that is down to me and Lou.
All of the evidence suggests that you have abducted April.
It happened exactly the way I'm telling you. I did not abduct April.
Little Diawl. Little Devil. That's what we used to call her. Because she was into mischief. Not naughty, but mischief. That was part of her personality. She had to have a bicycle because of her disabilities. The bike gave April massive independence. She wouldn't have to rely on us to walk. She wouldn't have to wait for us if she got tired to pick her up and carry her or anything like that. The bike was her legs, so she'd go everywhere on this bike. She was never ever without it. She just loved it. I can remember everything about that day. She had swimming lessons. Took her to the pool. I took her in, got her changed. After she'd finished her lesson, changed her and everything like that. She was just skipping out the changing room. She was very happy. We then drove home. I was going to the local youth club. So I gave her a cuddle and a kiss, said, I'll take you in tonight, love you. And she said it back and off she went. She had tea at our house, went over to her friend's house. That was 3 of them all together. And then I thought, this is strange, April's not back.
This emergency. My daughter's been kidnapped. Sal, can you speak to somebody? She's gone off in a car with somebody. Somebody's picked her up in a car or something.
Okay, what's the name of the child that's gone missing?
April Jones.
How old is she?
5.
When the first call came in, I went to April's house. Obviously there's distress, there's confusion. What we were getting was that April had gone into a car, so time was crucial.
A 7-year-old girl tells police she saw what happened.
The one witness that we have, April's friend, who was out playing with her at the time, says that April got into the car, happy and smiley, on her own accord.
It's possible April knows the driver and the 999 call has been a false alarm. But with no more to go on, police must treat the incident as a potential crime in action.
Obviously there was roadblocks put in, the dog handlers were sent out, scenes were trying to be identified.
More and more people were being pulled in from all over the force area.
You've got people everywhere walking the pavements, the roads, into the hills, trying to find her.
There were police cars everywhere. The search teams were arriving, family, friends. I've never seen so many people, to be honest. People I didn't even know were coming out.
An hour passes and then 2 hours, but April's still not been found.
And I knew then what a massive, massive job this was going to be.
By dawn, there's still no news.
This morning they queued around the block, many having had no sleep, waiting to be told where to search.
April! April!
One of Dyfed-Powys Police's most senior detectives, Andy John, is brought in to lead the inquiry.
From the outset, the priority for myself and the overriding objective was to find April Jones safe and well. And that is about preserving life. We had a brief description of the vehicle provided by the 7-year-old friend of April, who was a witness at that time.
They describe it as a small van, small on the front and large at the back. So that could be interpreted as something similar to a Ford Connect van, something like a Land Rover, and also that April got into the driver's side.
The significant part of it was that she said that April got into the driver's side. Of course, at the time, that really didn't make a lot of sense. But then, as time wore on, it became apparent that in actual fact what she was describing was a left-hand drive vehicle.
It's the first clue to the driver's identity.
During the morning of the 2nd of October, at about 8 a.m, I had information passed to me through our intelligence cell to the effect that there was an individual named Mark Bridger who actually had access and owned a vehicle, a Land Rover, which was a left-hand drive. That was a significant step forward in terms of that vehicle potentially being the vehicle that was used to abduct April.
Handyman Mark Bridger lives a few miles north of Machynlleth. Immediately, he's designated as a person of interest.
He was a 46-year-old man. He lived alone. He had a number of children living within the same community.
He knew her. He was a local person. He saw her when we picked her up from school when he was with his girlfriend, picking her kids up.
If April knew the driver, this could explain why her friend said she got into the car happy and smiley. And now, other witnesses say they saw Bridger at the estate on Monday evening.
And as we firmed up on some of the main lines of inquiry, I made a decision to declare Mark Bridger as a suspect in the investigation.
Police are immediately sent to arrest him.
It was huge. There was a lot of activity going on over in Machynlleth.
They find Bridger's house empty, though officers notice something strange.
It feels very warm. There is what is described as a roaring fire, the wood burner. There was a distinct smell of detergent, cleaning fluid. The officers from that information felt that something had certainly gone on in that premises.
2 hours later, A patrol car spots Bridger walking beside a main road.
I started hearing on the radio the coordination of the arrest and the helicopter and everything.
He is a local man, they said, who has a vehicle similar to the one apparently involved in the 5-year-old's abduction.
I remember thinking to myself, wow, that was quick. That was quick.
On high alert, a police convoy speeds Bridger to Aberystwyth, 20 miles away.
When we had the call that someone had been arrested, we had about 30 minutes notice before he came into custody. When he came in, he was calm. He wasn't shouting or screaming or nothing like that.
As I was stood at the custody desk, Mark Bridger was brought in, and that was quite a unusual moment. I was expecting someone with a bit more emotion, but he was very calm. He was in control, I would say.
As Bridger's body is swabbed and his clothes seized, newly found CCTV arrives at the incident room. Filmed by a search helicopter, it shows, by pure chance, Mark Bridger 5 hours before his arrest.
What was interesting, he seemed to be very controlled, very calm in terms of the way he walked. Most people would probably have looked up and taken an interest in seeing a helicopter. That wasn't the case with Mark Bridger. It was just something which did raise alarm bells and supported some of the other information that we were getting to know about the individual.
Time is now critical.
It's almost 24 hours now from the time that April's gone missing.
DC's Louise Thomas and Noel Blakeman are assigned to conduct what's known as an urgent interview.
You've got all sorts of thoughts running through your mind. April Jones's family were desperate to try and find what has happened. The world's media were outside. I felt immense amount of pressure.
These interviews are ultimately fraught with danger. They're conducted without the presence of a solicitor for a very specific purpose. In this case, to find out where April was.
Is she still alive? And if she is, where is she?
You do not have to say anything, and anything you do say may be given in evidence.
Yes.
Okay? Okay then, Mark. Can you explain to us where April is?
I don't know where she is.
Suspected of kidnapping 5-year-old April Jones, police have arrested a local man, Mark Bridger.
The first question is preservation of life. So I said to Mark Bridger, where is she? Where is April Jones?
I don't know where she is. Yesterday, I came down to see my daughter's teacher. She had a parents' evening. And I then parked up opposite my girlfriend's house, which I believe is not far away from April's mother and father's house. Stupid. I'd had a few to drink, and there was 2 girls on their bikes. I remember the dark-headed girl came behind the car. I looked to see where the other girl was, and I couldn't see this other little girl. And the next minute, the bike was there.
Just coming into the Brynigog estate here now on the left-hand side. It's kind of surreal being back here again, especially at night like this. But being back in these circumstances and in these conditions where it's dark, it's night time.
I started the car up. As I went to pull away, the car, there wasn't a thud. I can't understand. The car rose up. As I opened the car, I walked round, and underneath the front of the car is now, I know to be April. She was only little. So I picked her up and I put her across my seat and put her in what is the offside seat, the the passenger seat. Tried to take her pulse, and there was nothing. I put my mouth over her mouth and went to blow, put my hand back on her chest, and that's when I realised one side of her chest wasn't there. I'd obviously crushed her little body. So I then drove out of Brynagorg.
He admits to being present at the time that April is taken. However, his version of events were along the lines of that he was collided with April while she's on her bike. As a result of that collision, April is injured. He tries to administer CPR and drives from the area with April in his vehicle. That was certainly something that I didn't expect to hear.
By placing himself at the scene with April, Bridger is making it hard for detectives to tell truth from lies.
It's just coming up on my right-hand side here now, the set of garages, which is right opposite the row of houses. So that's the abduction site of April Jones, or where Mark Bridger said that he'd had his road traffic accident and he'd run her over. Nothing has changed. It's that one street lamp in the corner. It's somewhere that children were playing innocently.
So I then drove out of Brynagorg. I remember driving down the back road. My intention was to get her medical help.
This is the back road that Mark Bridger says that he's driven, which is called Tanarat Road. It's the road leading from the Brynagorg estate onto the monument.
I ended up at the monument in Mach.
So what have you done there then, Mark?
I've then gone down by the railway station. I've turned round, I'm at the clock, and I remember her still being in the car. And that's when I realised
It's okay, Mark.
the colour had gone out of her.
Okay,
Her
right.
lips were purple. Paul and Coral are friends of mine. And I've killed their daughter.
It's an appalling admission.
He basically said that April had died as a result of this accident.
Although he's given a detailed account of April's death, Bridger now appears vague about what happened to her next.
We were trying to narrow down exactly when was the last point he remembers seeing April. That was the specific agenda that we needed to cover with him in that urgent interview.
So when you've got to the monument,
Yes.
is she in the car?
I'm trying to jog my memory to know what I had done.
Okay, it's okay, Mark.
The next minute, and I'm in my house, and she's not there. Been upstairs, and I can't find her. I wouldn't have ditched her. I know that. I wouldn't have. I'd have put her somewhere.
Despite the outburst, detectives are beginning to doubt Bridger's sincerity.
He would visibly cry.
But I can't remember what I've done.
There was these teardrops that were dropping onto the paper, almost the size of a 10p piece.
We need to find her.
I don't know where I've put her.
And then he'd look up at you, and there was nothing. There was no indication that he had been crying at all.
I'm going to stop the tape now. It's 18:45. Okay.
After 27 minutes, the urgent interview ends.
As we came out of that interview, we just thought, is Mark Bridger telling the truth? Is April Jones really dead?
In reality, at that time, we only had his word for that. We had this version of events with these haphazard locations. And then, thereafter, Nothing. You have to view that with some suspicion.
One thing is known. CCTV from a local petrol station shows Bridger's car leaving town just minutes after April was last seen. It's vital police discover what he did next. Desperate to find missing child April Jones, police scale up their media strategy.
Thank you very much for coming along to this press conference. With me is Coral Jones, April's mother, and Di Smith, who's April's step-granddad. They are accompanied by their family liaison officer, Hayley Hurd.
On Wednesday morning, we asked Coral if she'd do a press statement.
Coral's been told that Bridger is saying he killed April, but he doesn't know where she is.
She'd had some information, life-changing information, shared with her the night before, but of course the press weren't aware of that at that time.
It's been 36 hours since April was taken from us. There must be someone out there who knows where she is and can help the police find her. We are desperate for any news. April is only 5 years old. Please, please, help find her.
It was a little girl, and Coral was still trying to portray some hope. The emotion was horrendous. I did find that extremely emotional, to see her so upset.
As I said earlier, we're pursuing a number of lines of inquiry, and Mark Bridger is one of them.
Around Machynlleth, the search for April continues. In Aberystwyth, DC's Louise Thomas and Noel Blakeman prepare to interview Mark Bridger again.
He was obviously always sat there. The appropriate adult would be sat next to him to facilitate communication. And then you'd have the solicitor in the corner. Obviously we needed to speak to him again. Tuesday was very much his agenda, his account about what happened. By Wednesday it was now our agenda. It was our topic areas that we wanted to cover.
Today, detectives want to probe Bridger about his claim that he accidentally ran April over.
And you tell me that when you get out of your vehicle, that you look underneath the vehicle and you see April. Yes.
But a key witness, April's 7-year-old friend, has a different story.
She was able to tell us that April had gone into the car happy and smiling, not the running over and killing her in a car accident, how he described.
We have a witness that was present. This person says April got into the Land Rover via the driver's door, which on a normal car would be the right-hand side, but that's really the passenger side door on your car.
That is complete fabrication and lies. It can't have happened.
He is getting angry, but also trying not to show that anger physically, but it's in his voice. He's getting angry. That was the time for me that I realised how large and how big Mark Bridger was and how dominating he would have been with April.
Mark, is it a case that what you're telling us didn't quite happen?
It happened exactly the way I'm telling you. That person is lying. I did not abduct April. I'd like you to go away and do the tests on the car.
Right, it's just round here.
Oh, thank you.
Police turn to forensics to see if the evidence can decide. Did Mark Bridger run April over with the front of his car? Or did she climb into the passenger seat, happy and smiling, as the child witness claims?
This is Mark Bridger's Land Rover. I first saw it the day after he was arrested, and I haven't seen it since then.
There was two girls on their bikes. There was no thud, there was no knock, and the vehicle then rose up.
I removed the bumper because I was concerned about the damage here. It appeared to be broken, but that was not recent damage.
She was limp and felt lifeless. I'd obviously crushed her little body.
If a small child had been hit by one of these vehicles, it would have caused a lot of injuries. Blood, skin, DNA, even transfer of fibres from April's clothing. And there was absolutely nothing. Basically, his story wasn't true. He'd made it up. If he made that up, what else did he make up?
With no obvious evidence of April's death, police can't discount the possibility that she may still be alive.
I still was keeping an open mind at that point in terms of, are we still hopefully going to be finding April safe and well, in a hideout or at some location?
The inquiry team's lead search advisor is Gareth Thomas. He's now told to step up the search.
Whilst there was a chance that April was alive, all the stops were pulled out. It has been quoted as the largest search in British policing history. Mountain Rescue have reported that it was their largest search since Lockerbie. Our colleagues from Urban Search and Rescue and the Cave Rescue teams, Coast Guard, RNLI. And when you put all those together with the public, it was massive, absolutely massive.
The area close to Mark Bridger's house is given special attention.
This is the river just behind Bridger's house. Rivers are really notoriously difficult to search because everything's moving, very, very dynamic. And on 3 separate occasions, this river was fingertipped by police divers, also professional volunteers such as Mountain Rescue, Fire Service. About 5k downstream turns into a tidal estuary. So there are many, many difficult areas to have any sort of high level of confidence in knowing that April wasn't there. It was very, very difficult.
With search teams desperate for a lead, interviewers try a new strategy to unlock Bridger's memory.
During the interview, we gave him maps, even placed on the walls all around him to try and get him to sort of visualise certain areas. We were encouraging him to look at them, getting him to focus on where possibly that he may have put April.
You mentioned earlier about hiding her from the rain.
I wouldn't have buried her. I would have covered her or put her somewhere under shelter.
Are there locations that are personal and private to you that you would have laid April?
There's a cycle track just above my house, but I most certainly don't recollect being up there.
Despite the new strategy, Bridger still can't or won't reveal April's whereabouts.
It was hugely frustrating. We were desperately trying to work with each other and trying to find ways of how were we going to get this information from Mark Bridger.
There was pressure on us. We're not getting past that block about what happened after she had died in the car.
Andy John needs answers. He calls in one of Britain's leading experts on the criminal mind. This is the first time he's spoken about the case.
I first became aware of April Jones's disappearance on the day after the abduction had taken place.
I'd heard about Joe Sullivan. I knew he'd worked at the Madeleine McCann, but in particular the Sower murders.
My role is to give officers insight into how offenders of this nature think and how they process information and how they respond to certain types of questions.
Using his expertise, Dr. Sullivan now creates a psychological profile of Bridger.
One of the first things that I wanted to do was to see where Mark Bridger lived. As you walked into the front room, there was a shotgun above the fireplace. There were replica handguns and 2 pairs of handcuffs that were very openly displayed. He had a background in working in an abattoir. He had a number of knives that were in the property. He also had quite a number of books about SAS survival techniques and living in the wild, creating this impression of himself as some sort of Rambo-type character that suggested that perhaps he was a fantasist, someone living in a world that he'd created in his own mind.
Back at the station, Dr. Sullivan briefs the team on his early findings, just as they prepare for the last interview of the day.
So Joe Sullivan was already piecing together a psychological profile of Mark Bridger. He told us appealing to his paternal side possibly wasn't a good idea, but we decided to go against that really and just give it a go. We had nothing to lose.
The time on my watch is 2200 hours. This is going to be the final interview for tonight.
Yes.
It's been a tough day. Okay?
Obviously, she hasn't been found yet.
No, she hasn't been found. We need to bring her home.
I know. If I really honestly knew where she was, I would tell you.
We've only got your version of events. We've only got your word to say that you run her over and that you've killed her.
I can promise you that she's not alive. I can't change my story. It's what happened that night.
Mark, we don't want her to suffer anymore.
He's a father, he's got 6 children. You know, he wouldn't want this to happen to his child. But I was trying to plead with him, really.
You're a parent.
Yes.
You've got a daughter.
Yes.
Let's think about April's mum and dad and put yourself in their shoes.
I have done.
Okay.
For hours and hours sat in the cell.
I really thought perhaps, yes, this would be the turning point.
It doesn't matter what time of the night it is, Mark.
I will ring the bell.
Ring the bell, we'll speak to you, and we will sort it.
I want it sorted.
Mark Bridger has a story, and he's sticking to it. If police are to find April, they need a breakthrough.
I promise I will do everything.
We moved into Brynagog in the March of 2007. April was born, I think, maybe a week or 2 later.
She was premature, 7 weeks. She wanted to come out in this world at a young age.
April had mild cerebral palsy. She was so tiny. We didn't know if she'd make it. It was a really rough start to her life.
By 2012, April was living a happy life with mum Coral, dad Paul, and her siblings Harley and Jasmine.
The happy memories will always be there. Aberdyfi we used to go to a lot. We used to go there for days out.
She loved going to the beach and swimming in the sea.
She was just outgoing, bubbly, like her brothers and sisters were, but she ruled the roost.
Two and a half days since going missing, 44 police forces are now desperately trying to find April.
We turned on the TV
And we saw David Cameron doing a speech.
Well, my heart just goes out to April's family. I mean, this is every family's nightmare, clearly, having this happen to you. And the fact that she suffers cerebral palsy, something I know a little about from my own children, only makes this worse.
I'd never thought I'd hear a Prime Minister talk about me and my family at all.
My appeal would be, if you know anything, if you saw anything, heard anything, have any ideas you can bring forward, talk to the police, help this family find their lovely child.
I was so shocked, but so pleased that he had said something about it.
5 miles north of where the abduction happened, forensic teams are examining Bridger's house.
The focus for the house was to look for anything that could indicate April had been present. I asked for things like drinking vessels to be looked at. Had he provided April with any food? And then to also look for any blood staining, any items of clothing. When they did this in the bathroom, they did locate some tiny spots of blood on the bathroom wall. This was fed back to me. We don't know the source of those spots. They could be anybody's, and we just need to see if it matches April or not.
Samples are rushed to the lab. The results won't be in for 24 hours. Meanwhile, in Aberystwyth, the questioning of Mark Bridger enters its 3rd day.
The investigation team will be interviewing Mark Bridger again today, and we will continue to piece together his movements during the relevant times and looking to overlay his account with that we've gleaned from witnesses.
One witness reports seeing Bridger the morning after the abduction, close to the river near his home.
That witness will say that they saw Bridger walk into his car. Describes what appeared to be carrying a plastic black bag, like a bin liner. What was he doing there? You know, just a mile away from his home address, coming out of the undergrowth. So the theory is that he's either gone to recover something or he'd gone to place something there.
The lay-by is excavated, but nothing is found. With no body and Bridger sticking firmly to his story, it's a frustrating time for the detectives.
Just have a look at that.
Yes.
And think, where is April?
I really don't know.
I can remember going into the canteen and overhearing conversations about why can't they get him to tell us where she was. And, you know, in my mind, I'm really trying to get this information out, but it's just not happening.
Just to remind you, Mark, that the red light is on. Obviously, as we explained, this interview is being monitored.
Yes.
Okay.
Bridger's refusal to give up April now hints at a new and ominous side to his personality.
Joe Sullivan sat us down. He gave a PowerPoint presentation for about 20 minutes of how to identify and understand a psychopath.
I told him that I believed that Mark Bridger probably had quite a number of psychopathic traits. He was unlikely to experience an enormous amount of empathy or have any major sense of guilt about what he had done. Of course, he will inevitably try to present himself as someone who does have those characteristics, but the sense that I had from the information we had gathered even at that time was that this is a man who is not going to respond to an appeal to his better nature.
The profile suggests Bridger won't confess, so police must instead find inconsistencies in his story.
The main focus, I think, for Joe Sullivan and the main focus for everybody in the investigation was to keep Mark Bridger talking. The moment that Mark Bridger stops talking, we will not be able to go any further with the investigation. We would not get any more information out of him.
April went missing on Monday evening. Now, on Thursday, Andy John instructs the interviewing team.
Before we start this part of the interview, I do need to further arrest you, Mark, okay?
Right.
On suspicion of murder of April Jones on the 1st of October 2012.
There was shock, the physical shock of his body.
He was now white, he was pale, simply because he thought we had found her.
I can remember him turning to his solicitor, looking at like, hey, this is something you haven't told me yet.
There's another significant development. Detectives have found indecent images on Mark Bridger's laptop.
And I do have to further arrest you on suspicion of possession of child pornography. You're under caution, okay?
Yes.
There's now a possible sexual motive for the abduction. But crucially, after 3 days, police have also given up hope of finding April alive. It's a turning point in the investigation, and the family need to be told.
We had an agreement with Coral and her husband Paul that we would always tell them the truth.
Dave got a place for us to go away from the press, so we didn't have to have the press around us all the time. And there's little offices just up the road from where we live, and we called it our sanctuary place.
Here we are then, Coral.
Right.
The day that the status of the arrest of Mark Bridger changed, we went to pick up Paul and Coral to bring them to the sanctuary and shared the information, and it was just life-changing. It was dreadful.
To get told it's not an abduction case anymore, it's a murder. And you've got to tell your children they've lost a baby sister. Getting told that your daughter's dead, but they don't know where she is. And that was the hardest thing.
I briefly remember the volunteers have been called back from searching. It was just to be left to the professionals.
It is no longer appropriate for us to expect untrained members of the public to continue the search.
They didn't want them to come across the body. And I sort of remember people crying and complete strangers just in tears.
I think the fact that that status had been changed, that there was no hope, really, that April was going to be found alive, which was life-changing for Paul and Coral, and for Jasmine and Harley as well.
Police are now sure that Mark Bridger has murdered April. But after 2 days of intense interviews, there's still not enough evidence to charge him.
There was this facade that he was actually trying to help us out, but in reality wasn't actually giving us an awful lot.
It was an evening or a night shift when he asked for a warden survey map of the area so we could jog his memory. We'd be checking on him every 15-30 minutes in his cell, and he'd be lying on the floor just studying the map, but he never came up with anything to say where she was.
I've no doubt that while he's pawing over the maps and making it look like he is trying to remember the location of April's body, what he's actually doing in his head is trying to second guess where the interviews are going next, and what are the sorts of things that he needs to address and how he needs to present himself. This is an individual who's very much in survival mode.
Nothing. It was just another game he was playing with us. It was all one big game to him.
As days went by, we had less and less hope from the interview, so we expanded the search.
By Friday, police have identified over 600 search areas.
Everything you can see here is part of the search area. This was a real key area for us. And as you can see, it's heavily sided, steep, wooded valleys, very difficult terrain. A lot of these areas are only accessible by officers on ropes, working really carefully. And it's not just what you can see above the ground. There's the subterranean element as well. A lot of caves, heavily mined. But you can just see from this high point here, a massive search effort. April was a 5-year-old, but she was a very small 5-year-old. So one thing we had to consider, if he was going to conceal a body, that because April's size, she'd be quite easy to conceal, quite easy to carry, a sort of significant distance from a parked vehicle. He always told everybody he was in the special services, which has proved not to be the case. But he was certainly comfortable in the outdoors. We were told that he worked for the Forestry Commission, he'd worked as a lifeguard, he worked in an abattoir. So when we were looking for deposition sites or areas that he may have got rid of April's body, there was a lot of factors to consider.
So far, forensics have found no evidence to support Bridger's story that he ran April over.
She was lay there on the seat, and that's when I realised one side of her chest wasn't there.
Forensics have also examined the car's interior. Now, police will confront Bridger with the findings.
Our forensics guys have examined the vehicle. Okay. I'm advised that there is no trace of any blood, there is no trace of any hair, no trace of any skin.
Mark Bridger was relying on the fact that he'd run over April. There's this accident, he's done this, he then picks her up, puts her into the car, and then drives away. You'd expect to find blood from the injury, yet the scientists are turning around saying, hey, we haven't found anything.
There is no indication whatsoever of anybody underneath that vehicle.
That is obviously very strange, because if I have abducted her, there would be some sort of hair and fingerprints and things.
There's nothing there forensically to corroborate your account.
And this is an opportunity for you to try and
no, this is, I mean...
Let's move to the inside then,
yes.
The interior. Yeah. And again, I'm being told that there is no forensic evidence at all. No hair, no blood, no nothing. There's no blood.
I didn't feel any blood at that time anyway.
There was nothing visible.
There was nothing visible. Right. There was no traces of blood on me or her at that time.
There we are. That's fine. Thank you very much.
Nobody has seen this accident happen, and the only person that's saying that there was an accident was him.
Interviewed on suspicion of murdering April Jones, Mark Bridger claims he tried to save the 5-year-old after injuring her in a car accident. He also insists there was no blood on either him or her. Yet blood has now been found, not in Bridger's car, but in his house.
So around about 6:15 on the Friday evening, I received an email from the lab with the results of the blood spots from the bathroom wall. These two areas of apparent blood spatter on the bathroom wall we compared to the DNA that we'd obtained from April Jones's toothbrush, and it gave a match. Something obviously has happened at the home address of Mark Bridger.
And there's more fresh evidence.
They found a tiny bit of blood on the inside collar of Bridger's fleece. And there was also DNA present from April on the inside of his jogging bottoms. This is definitely a significant point in the investigation. We've now got a definite link between April and the scene of Mark Bridger's home address.
On the second day of having the sanctuary, Andy John came up and had to tell the parents that April's blood had been identified in Bridger's house.
I can't begin to imagine what it is like to have lost a child in such horrific circumstances, and the pain that the family would have suffered at the time.
I do find the hardest time was telling Harley that he was on my bed. Like we normally are, because he wouldn't go to bed until midnight at the time. And I had to tell him that his sister's not coming home. She's murdered. The scream still today haunts me. Somebody comes along like him and takes their little sister away. It's, well, there's nothing you can say about that, can you, really? Apart from what I want to do to him.
I remember wanting to go home and hug my two kids closely and be very thankful for what I had at home. I think it makes you put things into perspective and realise what is important and what isn't important.
The discovery of April's blood is a major breakthrough, but the case is about to enter still darker territory. Bridger's laptop has now been fully examined. Police hope its contents will finally force Bridger to reveal the truth.
Friday was the main day that we had to challenge him on all the sexually explicit material that was recovered from his computer. It was a tough day. Myself and all our experienced officers, we'd seen, child images before. We've had to interview child sex offenders before.
What I want to do is just start going through some of the images that we've recovered.
Right, okay.
They're difficult interviews to conduct because we're going to talk about pornographic images of children. It's not a nice subject at all, on any level.
Tell me what you see there then, first of all.
It looks like the 4 stages of developments of breasts.
How does that make you feel?
It doesn't make me feel sexual at all.
All right, the next image, what do you see there?
Right, obviously this is a young girl, could be between 8 and 12. There's nothing sexual about that to me at all.
He had a very clear strategy to distance himself from any form of sexual arousal to the images that he had on his computer. Because of course in his fantasy world, the Rambo-esque character that he sees himself as, there's no room for him being sexually interested in children.
Bridger is shown more images found on his laptop, some depicting violence and the sexual assault of children.
What I'm going to do now is turn over to the next image. It's image 3, brackets 15, JPEG. What's going on there?
There was also material within the computer of Mark Bridger having searched websites relating to child murders and other most horrific incidents.
Do you remember searching for that?
No.
Well, that being typed into the Google search engine.
I don't remember typing that in, and no, I don't.
This was somebody who was sexually interested in children. This was somebody who probably had a long-standing sexual interest in children.
I will conclude this interview now.
After almost 4 hours, the interview ends.
The case itself is starting to look like it's a sexually motivated child murder.
Police believe they have a motive, but still there's no body, and there's now only a few hours before Bridger's custody clock runs out.
I was very aware of the fact that we had potentially a maximum of 96 hours in which we could investigate the matters whilst Mark Bridger was in custody.
The significance of the custody clock is that when it reaches 0, you have to either have charged the suspect or he walks out of the police station.
We're on day 4 or 5 now. We need to either get him charged or he's going to be released.
Mark Bridger has now been in custody for 3.5 days. If he's not charged within the next few hours, he could walk free.
I can vividly remember how anxious Coral was. She was frightened that he wasn't going to be charged, because if he wasn't charged, as we kept telling her, the law said he had to be released.
The decision whether or not to charge Mark Bridger will be made by the Crown Prosecution Service. But first, they must wait for one last interview, hoping that DC's Louise Thomas and Noel Blakeman can finally crack their suspect.
You can tell me where she is, but you won't. You know where the body is. You know where she is. Did you intend to murder her?
No. This last interview really is the last throw at the dice. It's what we call the challenge. And it's a summary, really, of everything that we've gone through for that week. And it's a challenge of all the inconsistencies that we were able to put to him. I mean, ultimately, our case stood on Mark Bridger's word against a child witness. And she was able to tell us that April Jones got into that car willingly. There was no evidence of a road traffic accident. There was no blood or anything of that of April Jones in the vehicle or outside the vehicle. And we had April Jones's DNA on certain garments he'd been wearing.
Forensic tests have also proved that blood found in the house is April's.
It's gold dust. We've got blood in his bathroom from April.
Blood has been found on the wall of the bathroom at your house.
Right.
And this blood gives a full DNA profile of April Jones.
The only explanation I've got is obviously if I've got blood on my hands, if I haven't dried my hands, you flick your hands, I've gone for a wee.
Within seconds, he goes, that must have been when I was drying my hands. I just dried my hands like this.
He was quite animated in how he was recreating the washing of the hands and the possibility of flicking.
So it's possibly a transfer of blood from having some sort of blood on my hands.
But there was no blood in the car. You said you didn't find any visible blood on you or anything. I must have been mistaken. Clearly there was his response.
Faced with damning evidence, still Bridger refuses to flinch.
Obviously there was only a very minute amount of blood, which I've said from the beginning. I never ever recall having blood from the injury or from April's body
And you made that
on me.
Yeah, let me stop you there.
Yes, sorry, yes.
The question I have to ask.
Yes.
Yeah. Is that blood there because April was assaulted in the bathroom?
Not at all. Not that I recollect at all, no.
DC Blakeman now moves on to the evidence found on Mark Bridger's laptop.
You're obviously concerned that you have a sexual interest in children.
I haven't got an interest in children.
We knew that we had found child pornography on his computers, and we knew that he'd been viewing them moments and days leading up to what had happened to April Jones.
And you viewed all these photos within minutes of each other. Were you masturbating to these photographs?
No.
Is this a build-up? Is this what was happening that morning? A build-up of sexual frustration, maybe?
Why hasn't it built up before then?
Maybe the opportunity hasn't arisen.
Or maybe it's just shit.
He did not like to be depicted as a paedophile and somebody that was looking images for sexual gratification of children. That's when it became argumentative. That's when we saw the real Mark Bridger.
Explain to me how and why you sexually assaulted April.
I did not sexually assault April. There was no sexual assault on April.
Did you suffocate her?
No.
Did you use a sharp weapon?
No. All my knives can be checked.
All of the evidence we have suggests that you have abducted and murdered April with a sexual motive. Therefore, the reason that you're not telling us where her body is because the discovery of her body will provide the evidence of this. Is this not the case?
This is not the case at all. I have stuck by my story, and I still stick by my story, that April's body was crushed under my wheel of my car.
Unless there's anything else that you want to say, I'm going to conclude this interview now.
All I want to say to Paul and Coral, that I'm sorry for what happened, and that if I, in my heart of hearts, knew where she was, I would tell you.
As the interview ends, police are already in final negotiations with the Crown Prosecution Service.
And just over an hour after that, we were charging him with the murder of April Jones.
I charged him with 3 counts, 1 for murder, 1 for child abduction and 1 for perverting the course of justice. There was no emotion whatsoever coming from Mark Bridger.
He was charged with the murder and abduction of April Jones.
I was just pleased. I was so happy I cried.
He presented himself to the next available court, which was on the following Monday.
It's 7 days since April went missing.
People were throwing cans and all sorts at the van at him. And people were going mad. And that's people I didn't even know were outraged by him for what he's done.
I don't think anybody could have prepared us really for the reaction that we had when the guilty verdict came in.
It was the best news I ever had. It was so overwhelming that he's never coming out. He can't hurt no more children.
In court, Bridger again claimed that April had died in a terrible accident. Instead, the evidence showed him to be a premeditated killer and paedophile who'd been on the prowl for a young girl.
There may be sadistic elements to his personality whereby he enjoys the distress that he causes to others. He probably was someone who had fantasized about abducting and murdering a child. He certainly was primed and ready for that opportunity, and that was something he'd visualized in his head and something that he wanted to happen.
I believe that April was taken by Mark Bridger to his home address, and there April may well have been subjected to sexual acts and then subsequently suffered significant harm which led to her death. I believe that parts of April may have been disposed of in the wood burner and elsewhere within the Machynlleth area.
I don't know where April is. I wish I did.
I know they had a funeral for her with the fragments from the fire, but they didn't have her. And for me, I just wish that he would come forward and give that information, because it must be heartbreaking for them not knowing what's happened to their little girl.
You think about April every day. It's never a thought that she's gone. Like, you never not think about her. You could just be doing the most simplest of things. You sat watching TV and you'd be like, oh yeah, she'd like this. Or you see kids playing out and like, oh yeah, April should be that age. She's always on your mind. She's just there.
For us, I suppose there's unfinished business, isn't there? There was no body, despite searching. We had not located her. We didn't, as interviewers, we hadn't got him to say where she was.
I have been told that a lot feel guilty because they never found April. They've got nothing to feel guilty about. We've got him behind bars, and I'm thankful for what they've done. We haven't got April, and it is sad. I don't remember the sad days. I just want to remember the happy-go-lucky little April she was.